Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Joseph Atick, Executive Chairman of ID for Africa, and I would like to welcome you to the 2021 season premiere of our livecast series. Today marks our 11th episode since inception and is part 2 of the two-part series which we had started in December on pathways to identity ecosystem development. In part 1, we covered open source, and today we cover open APIs. Before we start this session, I'd like to unveil the next 2 episodes. The first will be on the 11th of February and is a spotlight on the identity ecosystem of Mauritius. Registration is open today. This is part of our continuing country progress report series and follows the episodes we did on Nigeria and Tanzania in 2020, and will offer another perspective on how to successfully create an integrated identity management ecosystem with strong built-in data protection and privacy regulations. The second will be on the 24th of February and is entitled Infant Identity Management and the Legal Identity Agenda, and will examine what is needed to get identity right from the start. This includes policy discussions and an exploration of business practices and technologies, including the latest on infant biometrics and the traceability to the source through linkage with parents' digital IDs. We will announce the lineup in the next few weeks. Back to today's episode. I'd like to explain the significance of the subject and set the expectations. As I had mentioned in part 1, in a 2018 survey, we had identified vendor and technology lock-in or lack of interoperability as one of the highest obstacles that had inhibited the development of identity solutions in Africa. We think this has led to a chilling effect, where identity stakeholders hesitate to commit to a solution for fear that once they have, they would be locked in for many years with a system that's difficult to evolve to meet their changing needs or introduce newer technologies. This chilling effect is in fact commonplace in any sector that relies on non-interoperable IT solutions for their business practices. It points to something deeper than the interoperability problem. It points to a major flaw in the underlying architecture, and it calls for a reassessment of how solutions should be built, especially given the current state of the art of IT. We've got the cloud, data centricity, and the available crowd collaborative tools. So while a specific problem within the identity community in Africa was highlighted in 2018, thinking about how to deal with it is opening the door to a deeper examination of solution methodologies. And now we believe is disrupting how enterprise identity solutions are developed and deployed worldwide. One notable methodology which has gained significant traction in recent years across several sectors is the so-called open API architecture. It has garnered so much enthusiasm within the IT community that some have called it the API revolution. Effectively, open APIs are much bigger than simply a method for solution development free of vendor and technology lock-ins. They have the potential to disrupt and recreate entire sectorial economies and to usher the 4th industrial revolution. So what is this architecture about? Is it real or is it hype? The concept is easy to explain. Open APIs represent an application development methodology where solutions are built by integrating a set of discrete, reusable, plug-and-play microservices. These are autonomous modules optimized to perform their stated tasks and nothing more, and could live over the cloud in different domains. These microservices interact with each other and with other services to affect data flows and application integration. And they do it through API exposure, through application programming interface exposure, which represents the only interdependence among the modules. This methodology clearly sits on the opposite end of the spectrum of the highly integrated monolithic solutions of the past, which have dominated the African landscape in the identity domain and beyond. The advantages of the new approach are easy to see. It enables faster development and deployment of highly scalable and flexible applications. It leverages collaborations for improved efficiency and innovation, where different teams can focus on different modules, and it lowers the barrier to entry to any player with a good idea, no matter what their size is, even if they can only focus on one module. As a byproduct, there should be no vendor or technology lock-ins, as the customer is free to replace any module or add new ones at any time in the solution lifecycle. But the new architecture will not emerge on its own in any given sector. There needs to be informed government regulations and/or transparent procurement practices and/or industry collaborative initiatives and commitment to encourage and promote the emergence of this open ecosystem with multitude of choice and participants. While ID for Africa does not endorse any specific API initiative, we leave it to the stakeholders to agree on the definition of modules and on the APIs that are needed to connect them. We do, however, recommend open API standardization as a methodology for ecosystem development. We urge African procurement authorities to insist on the broadest set of standards in their requirements, and these should include the appropriate API standards, not just data formats and hardware interfaces. Furthermore, we believe the outcome of this standardization should be freely available as public goods in the form of module specifications and APIs. I want to make sure that what I have just said is not misunderstood. In the previous episode, we explored open source public good initiatives. I want to emphasize these are not mutually exclusive with open APIs. You can have an open API framework, and within that framework, the modules can be proprietary or open source. However, I do caution the community about the danger of fragmentation if the open source and the open API initiatives do not converge. Open source initiatives are also modular, and hence they are necessarily built on a set of processes that communicate with each other subject to APIs. It would be unfortunate if the customers would have to deal with multiple sets of APIs and module definitions, instead of being able to simply replace one module by an open source module or another proprietary module or vice versa without needing to redo the data flow integration. We need to strive for plug and play interoperability. So we call upon all parties involved to work together to affect this harmonization, which does not undermine the viability or value proposition of any party, but has huge consequences to the end customers, the identity stakeholders in Africa and beyond. We structured today's livecast to give you a sense of the potential of APIs, open APIs, with a mix of panels and presentations. The lineup includes a general presentation on the API economy, what is driving it, what sectors have embraced it, where is it likely to go, and the risks and challenges of such methodology. This will be followed by two presentations where we will hear about the banking and telecom experiences with open APIs. These three short presentations will prepare us to hear about the identity industry, is how the identity industry is following in the footsteps of these sectors to build an open API initiative, OSIA, which is gaining support from industry and governments alike. But before we start the lineup, we will have a brief panel discussion with three leading African identity practitioners on where they are going and what their development pain points are at the moment. This will serve to put in context the presentation lineup and will set the stage for the final panel where the African perspective on open API for identity will be explored. Of course, there will be several opportunities for the audience to be heard live. So please press the button to raise your hand when I ask for expressions of interest so the operator can elevate you into the community voices. Don't be shy, be pertinent, and be heard. Now I'd like to welcome the illustrious panel. Operator, could you please bring the panelists on? With us today, we have Aliyu Aziz from Nigeria, Mory Camara from Guinea, Bali Andriantseheno from Madagascar, Kunal Jhanji from BCG, Boston Consulting Group, Hervé Robache from STET, Ian Turkington from TM Forum, and Debora Comparin from SIA. I'll pause for a second to ensure that everybody is on. Okay, just making sure everybody is on. I want to thank you all for taking the time and making the effort to be with us today. We're lucky to have this unique and highly diverse panel of experts, which will cover some of the most important aspects of this topic. However, I would be remiss if I did not point out a glaring absence today, and that is a discussion on privacy. In the new architecture, the ability to process and move data across domains creates opportunities for innovative services, but also risks for privacy. Hence, there needs to be effective data protection measures that retain control in the hands of the data owners. Unfortunately, today happens to be the CPDP 2021, the largest worldwide privacy and data protection convention. So we were unable to get the right data protection experts to join the panel because of the conflict. But rest assured, the panelists and we are aware of the importance of mitigating that risk, and they will touch upon this topic within their presentations. And we expect to return to it for a deeper dive in the future. Finally, before we start, I'd like to thank our development partners, the Gates and the Omidyar Foundations, for their support and for making the livecasts possible. Okay. Operator, please prepare the panel. Excellent. I see we have our first panel on. So, gentlemen, thank you so much once again for being with us. You've been with us before on these panels. I recognize DG Aziz, Mory, Camara, and Bali from Madagascar. It's really wonderful to see you once again for what promises to be a very, very exciting and interesting session. I want to start the session by asking you in turn to share with the audience what is happening in your country in terms of identity projects. What are the identity projects that you are now trying to work on and trying to deal with? And then we'll talk about some of the challenges that you face. So let's go with Aziz to start with. Where are you with your identity projects and what's driving your agenda?
Well, thank you very much, Chairman, and good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Today, as of today, let's take the good news that we have enrolled Nigerians up to 46 million out of the 200 and more million. And we also have our mobile app online that will allow people to then have their digital ID. And also some of our ID4D projects agreements have been signed. So we are entering the implementation mode. But we also have security situation whereby there's a lot of kidnapping, banditry, and in each one of these things, a mobile phone number has been used and there's no way of tracing who owns that number. Therefore, we have federal government directives to now link each of the SIMs with the national identification number after registration. And therefore, all the telcos have now been asked to also part of the licensing of public and private sector to now capture data. Therefore, it means that we will have more data centers that are capturing and there's need for new APIs, especially for the Android system. We have been operating on the Windows system, and also there's need for bulk processing of the data that has been captured by the telcos, and that is in a nutshell where we are. And there's a lot of activities, and the numbers are rising, and like our enrollment have moved to have quadrupled for the past 2 months. It has been moving at very high speed. Therefore, our system, our verification system, is being bombarded by so much need for verification. Before, it was only the NIN, that is the demographic information, that is being verified. Now, fingerprint is also being done by the telco. So our system is being overstretched. So there's so much that needs to be done. Therefore, open API and also cloud computing and cybersecurity are all things that we need to adopt.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. So basically, you've now gotten into the scaling phase. You're scaling your enrollment of the population. You're scaling the issuance of the NIN because you now have an application, which is a priority application, which is basically getting your SIM linked to your NIN. Yes. What do you expect by the end of this year in terms of the number of NINs that would have been issued and linked to a SIM?
Well, according to the government's directive, is that every person that is using a NIN, a SIM, must have a NIN. Therefore, in our own perspective, like myself, I have about 6 SIMs that I'm using, and majority of people to have up to 3. Therefore, if we are able to link this 46 million, we will have more than 100 million of the SIMs have been connected. And with the both private sector and public sector capturing for NIN, then we expect that more than half of the population must have NIN by the end of the year. And with the ecosystem, all this is thanks to the ecosystem that we have been building all along, and now it has reached a signing of the agreement situation. Therefore, we will get into the implementation.
Excellent. Okay, hold that thought. We'll come back. Mory, what is exciting and happening in the identity world that you're involved with in your country?
Well, there's a number of initiatives that are able to overcome the pandemic that we had. So we have the ID for the issue initiative that now is getting into being ready for the enrollment phase at a large scale. So that is exciting. We also have on a more focused and targeted side, the social and economic inclusion that had started a pretty ambitious enrollment project, but that had been affected by the pandemic. So those are those 2 main initiatives that are supported by the ID for the initiative at this point. There's also issuance of credentials at the security level by our Ministry of Interior. So the challenge that we see now, we are not at the phase of Nigeria, but is to establish a synergy with all those initiatives. The good news is that the ID 440 is taking more of a control of all of the initiatives. And I think the open API.
Mory, hold on. We're going to talk about only what projects are going on. We'll come back to the challenges and we'll come back to the open API.
Yes, I just wanted to say briefly that it was important because, as I said, we have a number of initiatives. Some are known, some are getting discovered as they're being implemented. It is going to become a real important factor for success for us in Guinea. So in a nutshell, this is where we are at this point.
So basically, you have a large number of projects that are impacting identity with multiple different identity stakeholders, and potentially some are being coordinated, some are not necessarily being coordinated. And so you've got essentially an ecosystem developing, and then we'll talk about what the challenge of that in a moment. But that's a good perspective. I should also point out that 3 countries that are being covered here, Nigeria, Guinea, and Madagascar, all have received funding from the World Bank to pursue identity projects. They've taken loans to pursue identity projects. And with that in mind, let me talk to Bali. Bali, unmute your phone, your computer, and give us a perspective of what identity projects are happening in your country.
Thank you, Chairman, and hello to everybody. As you said, I have to talk about what Madagascar has done so far in the past 2 years. Where are we now? And what are we heading to in the next 4 years? We have now 2 separate databases to manage the civil registry. One at the Ministry of Interior, and another one at the Ministry of Justice. But those 2 databases don't talk to each other. That's one thing. And then the Malagasy citizen does get an ID with a number with it only at the age of 18. That's the voting age in Madagascar. And third, now only a quarter, 3/4 of the age citizen has that ID system. So 1/4 of the citizen who should have it do not have that ID in the country. Where are we heading to? Because for the past 2 years, we've been talking about reforms. As we said, we badly need it. A new law was passed back in 2018, and that law aims for the unification of those 2 databases to manage civil registry. That's a big step already. And the second big goal in that new law is that each Malagasy citizen will be allotted a new unique identity code from birth to death. That's a big revolution in the system. We have 2 main goals that we intend to achieve in that reform. First, the ID problem should not be a barrier to democracy anymore. That's a big challenge because Madagascar has been a country with so many problems, so many transition problems between regimes. So we think that setting up a new ID system would solve a huge problem in that transition problem, because we've always discussing about the electoral list, and that is not always solved. The second main goal is that the national unique identifier will facilitate access to digitized public services, which would render a huge, easy service to the citizen. And then thirdly, the national ID ecosystem should be a sovereign one. That is very important because some harmonization problems have been identified, and we've noticed that someone from outside the country tried to get into our system. I think one very big objective is to have a sovereign national ecosystem to manage the ID. What we already have in Madagascar, we have a vision that the new governance strategy that we approved, that the government has approved back in December 2019, and that governance strategy sets up the new ID ecosystem as the basis of all the reforms within the administration. That's a big goal that we're trying to. And then, as you said, Dr. Atick, we got new financing from the World Bank, 140 million project from the World Bank. That should be starting very soon. That would head up for the next 4 years to unify the national civil registry system in one database, but then also the objective that we accepted with the World Bank is that by the end of that project, 5 million citizens should be allocated that new ID system. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so you basically are dealing with harmonization. You've got fragmentation in your identity databases. You need to harmonize, and you need to link them to basically service delivery, which is the next step in serving your population. So just very quickly, before we go into our line of presentations, I want to ask the three of you, focus on the technical challenge. Just very quickly, don't go into the details. I'll start with DJ Aziz. What do you think are the technical challenges that you are facing in trying to achieve the objectives that you just stated?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, there are major challenges. One, as you mentioned, scaling up the foundational ID system. That is the back-end system infrastructure for the ecosystem implementation to cater for the population, and also having many vendors now touching our system, and also having different operating systems that have been coming onto the system. There's also, of course, security and cybersecurity issues associated with the multiple entities integrating to the ID system, and then with the more enrollment system, we are also required to increase the demand. There's increase in the demand of NIN. NIN is being now asked for all government services that we have been that has been listed in our act, and also the regulations that we already have. So therefore, the NIN is required for all government services now. Therefore, that is a challenge of this scaling up. And then even the SIM registration too, now that people, there is a lot of Internet of Things, therefore that the SIM is also being used in those Internet of Things. Therefore, it requires a lot of those challenges, and also having different systems. That is, we have the enrollment system itself, we have the ABs itself, and then we have the verification subsystem. And then now that the telcos requires bulk verification system also that needs to be built. These are the major challenges that we have.
So do you feel you have a plan to address the concerns about this heterogeneity of systems so that they talk to each other, but so they're interoperable? And also, do you feel you are on the right path to address the issues that were identified a few years ago in terms of vendor and technology lock-in? Do you feel you have that under control?
Yeah, because we have been working and then working with the ID for Africa. So some of the issues that we have commenced addressing them, but we have not yet reached that level, because as even the client alone that we have Windows, and now there are Android systems that are coming in. Therefore, we need to standardize the approach, and then some of the clients too are already on doing something with their systems, and now they need to integrate what they are doing with our own system, not to have a standalone system that is doing that. Therefore, those are the areas that we have challenges.
Okay. Thank you, DJ Aziz. We'll come back at the end to a panel focused specifically on the interoperability question. I see some questions are starting to emerge for you. We'll take them at the end. So let's keep going by going to Mory. Mory, the same question. What do you feel are the challenges that you're feeling in your country?
Thank you for the question. We have a number of challenges, but the main one I see is the wide adoption of the foundational system, which is being developed now. So we have functional and sectoral identity systems that have been in place for a while now, that have established some kind of a credibility, that it be in education, in security, and others. Now, a foundational system, a unique number, is being developed. The integration within all of those, all the parties of that ecosystem is a challenge in terms of interoperability, in terms of security, in terms of standard, in terms also of, I would say, context. So many of the issues that Dr. Aziz has mentioned, we face, but the main one is the wide adoption of the foundational system that is being in place now. Everything else derives from that at this point, technically.
Okay, thank you. Basically, you've got legacy systems, and then you've got the foundation systems coming on board that need to replace some of those legacy systems and integrate with them. Excellent. So Bali, the same question before we conclude the panel and move on to the presentation lineup. We'll come back to you at the end.
Thanks, Dr. Atick. We have the same challenge for us, legacy. As reform is not always easy to get accepted by everybody. And in particular in Madagascar, we have noticed that some decision makers have no interest to change the whole ID system at various levels, from top to bottom. And that's a huge, huge problem. As I said again, a few harmonization attempts were made before with no success so far. And technically, we all know that technology is advancing so fast that keeping abreast with it will not be easy. We're aware of that, so we have to face that. Second, and this is a very important point to us, we are aware that architecture choice will be a key to success or failure. So we really have to be very, very careful in choosing the architecture that we'll be using for our new system. The interoperability problem is a very important stand, as for Madagascar, it's very, very important that we take it as a special obligation for two reasons. We have two sides of interoperability. The external one, the way the ID ecosystem exchanges with outside systems, government and public administration, private sector, international partners. So we know we have identified our solution to that. We will be using the X-Road interoperability system for that. But then the internal interoperability question is really linked to our subject today, because it's the way various modules within our ID system interact and are linked to each other. And this promises to give us huge headaches if it's not thought through. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So basically, we understand the challenges. You are all working within an ecosystem. There's no such thing as a monolithic single system that does everything. You're going to need to harmonize among all the systems, the modules, and then internal between them, among them, and external among other systems. So you need ways in which these systems talk to each other in a manner that is not proprietary, because you want to be able to replace modules. You want to be able to open new connections, especially as DG Aziz was talking. There's now new sectors that are coming in and asking to access through an API your database for verification. We are going to have a lot more discussion on these three countries, spotlights Nigeria, Guinea, and Madagascar. So, but let's go to the panel, the presentation lineup, starting with the Boston Consulting Group with an overview presentation on the economy of API, the API economy. The questions that have come in, we are going to answer them at the end. So please keep them in the Q&A. You can keep them coming. So let's welcome Kunal from Boston Consulting.
Thank you, Dr. Atick. Hello to all of you from London. I hope you can all see my screen and it's working fine. So I'll just give a quick introduction. I'm Kunal Jhanji. I'm a partner in the BCG London office, and I lead our UK, Netherlands, and Belgium's payments practice. I work a lot on payments and tech-related topics, and open API, open finance, open banking is a topic that is increasingly becoming important with regulators and market participants all around the world. And I've done a number of these things as part of BCG across the world. And I was also the head of policy on secondment at the open banking implementation entity in the UK. So we'll be bringing in some of that practice experience as well. In terms of, it was great to hear the panelists talk about the initiatives they're taking around identity and also using some of the API ecosystem that is emerging in their markets to deliver those initiatives. I think that the key thing for us to really all to know is APIs are not really a new thing as such. APIs have been around for many, many years and have essentially allowed the participants, apologies, and have allowed the participants to really beef up their businesses and business models for a number of years, starting with the likes of Google, eBay, Facebook, Salesforce, and they've all sort of built on these open API economies in a very, very successful manner. If you look at the emergence or the initialization of this API economy, you're almost going to go back to the kind of first waves of early 2000, where companies like Salesforce started creating APIs for internal purposes as well as to clients in almost a kind of bilateral relationship format. As you move ahead, the industrialization of these API platforms started to happen with the likes of eBay making it available to its merchant base, Amazon opening up to their merchant base, Google with Google Maps integrated into different websites. And then subsequently, if you move towards the early 2010s, this sort of ecosystem development that we are seeing now and a significant government and regulatory push has emerged, right? Where a number of the regulators, and we've heard from all these, the panelists before, on how they are utilizing government initiatives on API ecosystems. Open banking has become a big thing across the markets. In fact, I've had multiple conversations with a number of regulators in Africa, in particular, South African regulators who are quite keenly looking at open banking type regimes, leveraging the open API ecosystem. And there are so many benefits of opening up the infrastructure and the markets, leveraging this sort of an infrastructure. It brings equality, it brings financial inclusions, it's all about security. So there are so many benefits that are driven out of this sort of ecosystem. And I think there are two big things that we believe have really driven the world economy to a very different place now by leveraging open API type ecosystems. And I think we see that happen increasingly in Africa as well, where the startups are leveraging these almost bilateral relationships where providers are opening up their APIs, and these startups can scale quickly. They can offer some interesting propositions and services to their customers. The customers are really benefiting from that kind of ecosystem. And then subsequently, as with the identity solutions, it's the same with your utility systems, your financial services ecosystem, where databases are being leveraged across industry, across sectors, to create real-time propositions for consumers, either around lending, to end consumer or working capital solution for an SME to grow their business, or indeed for adding new types of competition in your market and breaking to some extent oligopolistic structures or monopolistic structures in any particular sector, in any particular market. So I think, the benefits, as I said, go beyond a particular type of player or a particular type of sector to some extent. The other thing that's really happened is Open API to some extent, as a result of technological advancement, have become a reality. But equally, the inverse is true, right? Because the Open API ecosystem is gaining momentum across markets, across verticals, the technology is having to keep pace with that kind of demand in the market as well, right? So you're looking at better security infrastructure, better legacy infrastructures, better platforms, better use of data analytics, better regulations around data structures as well, right? I mean, that is a core part of what Dr. Atick was referencing earlier around privacy, data management, ensuring a number of these interactions remain secure and consumer trust is maintained, right? So in order for you now to move into an Open API ecosystem, which is well built, has the right foundation, and has the right ways to grow and scale, I think to some extent, a number of the things that we talk about here as a building block to that need to become true, right? And that's absolutely true for most of the African markets. And then, open banking, as I mentioned, I think we should not just look at this as a financial services initiative. Open banking for different markets is a different thing. In the more developed economies, this is about increasing competition. In developing economies or emerging economies, the open banking is all about financial inclusion. It's all about innovation. It's all about leapfrogging the technology and advancements that the Western economies or the more developed economies have had to go through. So if you take a use case of M-Pesa has existed in Africa because of the lack of infrastructure. And it's actually now developed into an ecosystem which has leapt through the technological life cycle that traditional economies have had to go through, right? Same is the case with some of the propositions you see in Asian economies, the likes of Alipay, WeChat Pay, Grab ecosystem. Those type of developments have happened because regulators and the governments have taken a view that they, to some extent, need to have a different objective on opening up the financial services infrastructure and other sectors in their markets as well. I think the more important thing here is, no matter how much work the industry does, no matter how much work the regulators or the government authorities do, if you do not have the buy-in of the customers or the consumers who are ultimately going to consume these services, then frankly, none of these ecosystems are going to take off, right? So I think a very important aspect that almost needs to be fulfilled by the authorities, by the regulators, to some extent, but also to a large extent by the industry players, is how do you now create initiatives which absolutely drive value to the end consumers, which drive trust in the consumers that they're able to share their data, they want to open up relationships with new providers in the market, and ultimately are able to benefit from customer-centric offerings that are being delivered in the market, right? So the open API ecosystem enablement needs to drive some of these outcomes to be successful to a large extent. And I think here you can see that, even though in some markets the regulation may be very, very advanced, the consumer trust in being able to open up and be participant of that open API economy is not very high. So unless we are to move some of these countries to a top right quadrant, no matter how advanced the regulation is, if the consumers do not trust that ecosystem, it's just not going to succeed. And I think that's the biggest challenge facing pretty much most of the markets, not just African continent. And then, as you move towards the new concept of these open API economies, I think you can see how the new breed of companies have really, really succeeded off the back of that platformification agenda that open APIs have enabled, right? You look at media, you look at transportation, you look at gaming, you look at industrial goods, you look at electronics. All of the companies that have emerged as disruptors in those different sectors have really, really taken on open API as the basis of expansion and basis of reaching out to build an ecosystem with consumers and with their partners. And again, open banking, as I mentioned earlier, I think in addition to what I mentioned, the emergence of multiple enablers outside of APIs is almost a byproduct and absolutely needs to be given a lot of attention to, right? I think just creating an open API, a secure open API even, is not going to cut the bill, right? You need to make both ends of the market work, collaborate through a set of standards, through a set of regulations, through a set of guidelines even, so that they have a basis of working with each other and they have a basis in which to serve the end consumer needs. And I think that's a key middle block here around enablement of that market. And then, to some extent, I have mentioned regulators and government authorities a lot here, but there are markets where some of these ecosystems are developing almost voluntarily. It doesn't necessarily need to be driven through regulation or regulatory agenda, right? But to some extent, I do believe that regulatory agenda, even if it's soft touch, will allow for a framework in a market to be established off the back of which, you can scale up that initiatives that drive the advancement of this agenda in each of the market, right? And I won't go through this in detail, but just to give you an example to see how even the larger players now are really looking for, partnerships, opening up API platforms to disseminate their services to some of the fintechs emerging in the markets. And also they're building up new platforms as almost spin-off entities. So you can see the power of the open API ecosystem, that the largest players, even in financial services around the world, are now starting to look at how best to, tackle this element of competition that they will face with the new breed of competitors. I think I just want to end with a key message for this audience here is, as I said, safety, security protocols, extremely important for consumer trust and consumer buy-in, right? The economic model that drives commercialization of some of these initiatives is just incredibly important, right? You cannot just, force companies to comply with the regulations being set out without setting out a path to realize returns on those investments. And you have to have that kind of functioning market in some way to make this happen. And then standardization of the data stream. And I know the panel discussed this as well, that data standardization, lack of fragmentation is very important to really have that one-to-many access which open APIs strive on. And then finally, understanding what risks these ecosystems create, how are you going to work through security, liability, dispute resolution mechanisms becomes incredibly important, right? And I think that is where some of the maturity is just not existent in a number of the markets which have taken up open API ecosystems. So I'll leave it at that, and hopefully we can discuss in the panel later on any questions that emerge. But thank you for your time, all of you.
Kunal, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. Yes, as you said, we will have a mini panel when the three of you finish their presentations, and we can take up some of the questions. Operator, could you please bring Hervé Robache from STET to give us a perspective dedicated to the banking sector?
Hello. I'm Hervé Robache from STET. STET is a French automated clearing house processing payments in France and Belgium. And I've been in charge for some years now for an API initiative for the French market. But this initiative is used as well in Belgium and Luxembourg. So I will start with a short history.
Hervé, sorry, it appears your mic is not connected well. The line is bad. We're getting messages that the line is bad. Could you?
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but it seems to be very noisy.
Very noisy. Sorry.
Very noisy.
Okay, I will. Okay. Just a short history from the bank. So in the Middle Age, as you can see on this slide, there was no technology. In fact, technology appeared in the 60th and 20th century. And then there was a big disruption with internet in the 90s till the 20th century. And at this time, the payment service user could access his bank in order to get its account data. And it could also access a merchant to purchase some goods or services. And in fact, it induced the possibility of e-commerce and then
excuse me, Mr. Robache, I'm sorry, we have to pause you 1 second. The technical issue we think may be solved if you can use a headset. Do you have a headset nearby?
Sorry, I don't have.
Okay.
So maybe what we should do, because Hervé, the audience is not hearing you. It's a laptop microphone issue. Maybe you can restart. What we can do maybe is move Ian in the panel ahead of you, and then give you 15 minutes to try to fix this issue, because the audience is saying they cannot hear you. Do you mind if we do that?
Okay, it's all right.
Sorry about that, but we want to make sure your message is heard. Shana, could you please move Ian ahead, and then we'll work with Hervé to fix this problem. Apologies for this technical issue, it happens. Okay, Ian, sorry for the last minute notice, but I'm sure you're ready.
Yep, I am indeed. Thank you very much, Joseph. So let me just begin by sharing my screen. Okay, hello everyone. As you can see, oh, it's gone to the wrong screen. Sorry, yep, just get that started. As you can see, I'm in Turkington. I'm the VP for Architecture and APIs from TM Forum. And I'm going to share a few moments here really just to talk about how open APIs have really transformed IT in the telecoms sector, and tell you a little bit about that journey that we've been on with TM Forum. Before I begin, I'm conscious that TM Forum may be something you're not familiar with. We work primarily in the telecom sector. So I imagine that there's a number of you who will be familiar with TM Forum, but I suspect there will be a great many of you who are not. So let me begin with just a little bit of an introduction to TM Forum. TM Forum is a member-led, not-for-profit organization. We were formed just over 30 years ago, and we work in the telecoms industry. We work with the service providers, we work with the vendors who provide the technology to those service providers, and we work with the consultants and the systems integrators who work with both those vendors and those service providers. Our mission is to enable the service provider business of tomorrow. So if our members are successful, we are successful. As I mentioned, we're member-led. We are a very small organization, but we have a large global presence, and that is because of our members. We have 850 member companies, and between those 850, over 90,000 member professionals are involved in our work and contribute to our work. So we're not an organization who lock ourselves in the dark and then come back with the right answer. We actually work with our members. We look at the business problems that need to be solved, and together we solve those problems. And then those solutions develop into what I would call soft standards, which are things like guidelines and best practices. Or in the case of APIs, they develop into hard standards where you can actually measure compliance and you can follow those standards. So I was just having a look in preparation for this. We do have over 88 members in Middle East and Africa. The vast majority of that number, although I couldn't separate it very readily, but the vast majority are in the African continent. And as I say, together we collaborate with these members and we work on the problems that the industry faces. So hopefully that's just given you a little bit of context in terms of what TM Forum is. And there's a few statistics. You can get these slides afterwards. You can look at that at your leisure. I will not loiter on that slide. But before I talk about open APIs, I want to talk about TM Forum's Open Digital Framework and Open Digital Architecture. In the introduction, Joseph talked about how a new architecture is required to actually exploit APIs, and I couldn't agree more. So I want to begin by thinking about why do we need this new Open Digital Framework? Why do we need this new Open Digital Architecture? And this is a graph we use to describe the situation we face in the telecommunications sector. What we're observing is that traditional telcos are undergoing a transformation. And on this graph, what they're doing is they're moving horizontally from the traditional telco square on the bottom left to the digital telco square on the bottom right. That's the current trajectory of most telcos. What they're doing is they're achieving digital efficiency. So they're looking at automation, they're exploiting methods such as cloud computing, agile development, much better integration with their customers. But as they move in that direction from left to right, they're becoming more efficient at doing what they do. So they're still a telco, but they move and they become a digital telco. We believe from our analysis that that's not going to take them far enough. And we believe that telcos need to move to become a digital partner. And what we mean by that is the horizontal axis on this curve. This is what we call digital enablement. And this is where in the telecom sector, they will look at the ecosystem they are part of, and they will look at how communications play into other industries. Now, those industries can be things like health, they can be things like smart cities, they can be things like manufacturing, and all of those industries will need communication. And in the same way, when we think about digital efficiency, you introduce this easy collaboration between different parts of your organization. That same approach needs to happen when you become a digital partner, that you're actually having easy communication and digital communication, not just within your organization, but with the partners that you work with. And as I say, that could be health, manufacturing, so that they can take the communication services and make them part of their solution. So that's the problem the telco sector is facing. And this is where the Open Digital Framework comes into play. So this is an architectural view of the Open Digital Framework. On the left-hand side, we have a very simplified architectural view of a traditional communication service provider. Anybody who has worked in architecture and telecoms will recognize a picture like the one on the left-hand side. We have a network, and above that network, we have operational support systems to manage the network. Above that, we have business support systems to manage the product and the customer. And above that, we have operations and processes and people. And that model has kind of been how traditional communication service providers have been set up for many, many years. On the right, we have a different architecture, a different way of thinking about this. At the heart of this new architecture, we have cloud native IT components. These are small atomic components. They are reusable, they are plug and play, and very importantly for today, they expose their functionality through APIs. So rather than thinking about a lot of separate layers in your architecture, as will be shown on the left, you have a large number of IT components which sit in the middle. These components will be standardized, and this is how you get the zero-touch interoperability. They'll be standardized so that they can operate on an autonomous infrastructure, and that infrastructure, when we're talking about IT components, is traditionally cloud computing infrastructure. And they will also be standardized so as they can make use of the augmented intelligence, the artificial intelligence, the real-time operations data, which comes along at the top. So that's the way to think about the architecture which we're describing. I talked on the previous thing about the need for digital efficiency and for the need for digital enablement. And in terms of this architecture, that's represented by the zero-touch interoperability. This is saying that these components can talk to one another in a zero-touch way because they are standardized. And the zero-touch partnering from left to right on this picture shows that as we move forward, these components will not all belong to a particular organization. They will be shared. There will be some components in the partner domain. There will be some components in the telecom domain. And together, they will build the business solution that's required. There's one final thing I would just like to talk about before I leave this slide. If I can draw your eyes back to the left-hand side again for just a moment. Traditionally, we have thought about business support systems and operational support systems as being IT and being software. And we have thought about network as being hardware and being physical devices. As I'm sure you're all aware, increasingly network components are becoming virtualized and they are becoming software components. So what we're finding is, as we move towards this new architecture, the cloud native IT components are not just business support systems and operational support systems. These cloud native IT components will actually also be network components. And these network components will run on the network infrastructure in the same way as the IT components will run in the cloud infrastructure. So we're seeing that move, and certainly from a standards point of view, we're working with other standards organizations, particularly organizations like GSMA. GSMA very much have looked at the standards in the network layer, and TM Forum have very much looked at the standards in the systems layer. But as the network and the systems come together, and as network components simply become components, software components, we're working with GSMA to understand how these standards can work together and set the guidelines going forward. So hopefully that has given you an overview of the reason we need this and the essence of the architecture. I want to move on now and talk a little bit about TM Forum's open APIs. So this has been a multi-year global investment. We have a suite of over 50 REST-based open APIs. Now 50 may not sound like a lot, but this is actually when we sat down and looked at all of the APIs that a telecom organization will need. This is the number we have settled on. So these are actually large APIs that do quite a lot of functionality. We have worked collaboratively with our members, both vendors and service providers, to actually define these and develop them. And internally, this allows the service providers to achieve this digital efficiency that I talked about. And externally, it allows them to partner with other businesses. So the little graphic on the right is just really trying to show you have these components, which I talked about, and these components are connected by APIs. So I won't go into components too much more on this call because in the interests of time, but the APIs are at the heart of this architecture. Want to talk a little bit more about the APIs, how they have been very successfully used within the IT industry. This is an extract from TM Forum's website, how we publish our APIs. You can go on here, you can see the APIs which are available. You can download a human readable view of the standard for the API, but very importantly, if you're a software engineer, you can download the machine readable definition of the API and the associated conformance test kit. So by actually producing this information, we've allowed the industry to develop these APIs to a standard. A little bit more about adoption. We have seen great commitment to this APIs. We have an open API manifesto signed by the companies you can see here on the right. Service providers are committing to make use of the APIs, and vendors are committing to building their products with those APIs being how they expose that functionality. And the other thing, just in terms of adoption, we constantly monitor the usage of these APIs, the downloads which we're observing. And I did have some statistics. Yes, I had a quick look to see how has there been downloads from our members in Africa as well. There's been over 4,000 downloads in the last 12 months from African members. So they are getting used by the telecom sector in Africa. So we just monitor the usage, and as you can see, the graph is going in the right direction. We're getting increasing use, both from unique users and in terms of total quantities of downloads. So final thing I want to leave you with is just a little bit about the benefits of APIs. Don't want to give my words. You can read the sort of what people have said here. And I just want to point out what we do with our members is we talk about a thing called a My API story. And we allow member companies who have been successfully using APIs to write a short article about what they're using them for, what the benefits are of them, and so on, and they use them. And the other thing I would like to leave you with is, it's not even a recent white paper now, it's been out a research report quite some time ago, but this is looking at how companies are actually changing procurement by using APIs. So rather than the usual traditional requirements, they're actually specifying what they want in terms of the APIs that product has to conform to. And what they then do is they run a hackathon, and the vendors come along and they actually stand up their software, and if it doesn't work, then it's not compliant with the APIs. So it's actually had great results in some of the telecoms companies in terms of totally changing how they do procurement. And it's been a side benefit of the API program. So I will close it there, and I will hand back. Just one final word. What I would say is the development of these APIs in the telecom sector really has revolutionized the relationship between the telecoms companies and the vendors. And it really has changed how they approach APIs. And I can see going forward, as we move from digital efficiency and we move into digital enablement, it's going to be essential so as we can get the telecom sector working with the other sectors as well. So Joseph, if I can pass back to you.
Yes, please.
That's me for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A lot of points that you've raised that are very, very pertinent to our industry. You piqued my interest when you mentioned that the procurement is being changed. And that's something we as an industry, we need to note. We need to reform our procurement practices. Hervé is back with us. So I hope the audio is fixed.
Yes, I hope so. Can you hear me clear and loud?
Loud and clear. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for your flexibility.
So I was talking about the technology in banks, and with the internet disruption, so there was some new usage for the payment service user, but just after came some new actors. We name it third-party providers that intermediates between the bank and the payment service user in order to provide some new services like information on account or payment initiation. Information on account is something quite obvious for the payment user who has several accounts in several banks. For instance, you can see in this slide, I've got 3 different banks with 3 different layouts and 3 different sets of data. And the purpose of account information services is to unify and harmonize all these layouts and data sets in one single app. Payment initiation is a second usage, and in fact, there are two different usages of payment initiation. The first one is payment initiation on behalf of a merchant. And then the payment initiation relies on the purchase I've done against the merchant, and the merchant sends the payment request through a payment initiation service provider who asks my bank to send a credit transfer, and I've just to confirm this payment. The third use case is payment initiation on behalf of the payer. It's me, and I want to send some money on a monthly basis, for instance, to my brother, and I can schedule a recurrent payment, a standing order. I can do it from my bank, but if I can do it from a TPP who has payment initiation service and account information service as well, you can choose the best bank and the best account for which the credit transfer will be executed. But all these third-party providers who intermediates between the payment service user and the bank brings a lot of security issues. And the first one is the identity of the patient, since they're using my credentials in order to connect to my bank's account services. And the bank, for the bank, it's a security issue because they cannot be sure if it's really me or another actor who access their services. The second risk is a risk of credential theft if the third-party provider is hacked by a malicious actor. Then my password and my ID will be available maybe on the internet and be used by everyone who access my bank account. The second issue for screen scraping is it's a technology based on analysis of the web pages. So each bank has its own bank database. It applies a page layout to provide the web interface. And then after the third-party providers analyze these web pages in order to extract the relevant data, in order to then apply another page layout. And this is quite a loss of waste, a waste of energy and waste of time. In 2014, a new set of regulation came in Europe, mainly based on the PSD2, which is the Payment Service Directive in this version 2. But it's also include the GDPR, which is relevant about data privacy, and EIDAS, which is more technical about digital signature and trust services. All this set of regulation was an opportunity for the bank to move to an API initiative. In fact, what is an API initiative? It's scrapping the screen scrapping, and in order to give access to directly the bank database through an API plug, which is standardized and which provides the data and only the data. No page layout is provided through this API plug. So the third-party provider can implement an API plug interface in order to get data for the bank and also to send some instruction to the bank. There were in Europe several API initiatives. One is largely used is the one from the Berlin Group, but historically The first one which appeared was from the Open Banking UK. And we have also in France the API initiative led by STET, which is also used in Belgium and Luxembourg. Some banks provide their own API interface. For open banking in Europe, we were facing four different constraints. The first one is the legal framework, but we have also other constraints I will detail then after. The legal framework, so is based mainly on PSD2, although UK already had its own legal framework. But PSD2 is not the same from one country to another, since it has to be transposed in each national legislation, adding subtle differences. Moreover, the interpretation of the regulation on some topics may be different by the national competent authorities. So this is an headache for banks and TPPs who have to adapt their behavior to each country. And APIs have to cope with these legal jigsaw and subsequent issues on topics like registration, authentication, consent management, and so on. So my advice on this would be to keep regulation as an important driver, but to always keep in mind that clarity and simplicity is a key factor. The second constraint is the business framework. And Europe is not, the European Union is not a unified market, since each customer in each country has its own habits. For instance, there is a cultural habits in Germany using mainly cash. There are payment legacy in France and UK about card payments, and there are national schemes like Ideal in Netherlands. So convergence goes on in the European Union, but at a low pace. For instance, SEPA instruments were introduced in 2008, but were completely deployed in 2014. And SEPA instant credit transfer were launched in 2018, but represent only 8% of all credit transfers. We have to say that payments are mainly processed at national level, and part of cross-border payments is less than 3%. So APIs will have to cope with this market fragmentation as well, but this leads to complexity. And my advice on this is to keep in mind that APIs relies on microservices specification. Putting too much complexity in the API should be avoided. The third constraint is about the data model, and luckily, a lot of things already existed, since there are ISO 20022, which is the international standard for financial services. And each APIs were largely inspired by ISO 20022 components. But there are still some issues. For instance, identities can be held as a simple text or as a structured record. However, some banks do not take care about structured records and only provide a simple text. We are since 2015 working with a Berlin Group, SWIFT, and Open Banking UK about the convergence of API, and this has led to business justification in order to provide some standardized API resources for financial services. And my advice here is to not to hesitate to look around for inspiration, but adapt the data to your real needs. The technical model is the last constraint and is mostly based on technical standards like HTTP, TLS, REST, JSON, OAuth2. but some standards are different from one API to another, like the version of Open API, for instance. Some are not stable yet, like HTTP signature, and technical standards will evolve over time. So API will have to evolve as well. Agility is the key here, and keep in touch with all the standardization efforts around the world. Where are we now? Well, Open Banking UK is really on track, especially on account information, and goes far beyond the European PSD2. Berlin Group has finished its own PSD2 API and is now launching a new open finance framework that aims to go beyond PSD2. And STET API is on track as well. We registered more than 100 million requests last month, but there is no plan to go beyond PSD2. However, there are other usage of API than PSD2 in banking. For instance, card transaction initiation, invoicing, bank account lookup based on the phone number or email address. And obviously, there are usage of APIs in other sectors as well. Some clues in conclusion: simplicity, openness, and clarity. Simplicity. Keep in mind that you've got to build microservices that are simple, and you can build some Lego application based on these microservices. Openness. We published our API with open license, and this is quite important. And clarity is also important, since documentation must include technical specification, usage rule, and example as well. So sorry for the technical issues I encountered. If you have any question, I'm ready.
It happens. Thank you, Hervé, for this detailed presentation filled with advice. In fact, we're running behind schedule. So what I'd like to do is just bring the three presenters for just one question for them to park before they leave. So basically, I want to thank you for taking the time to enlighten us. As an identity industry, we're not as developed as the telecom, as the banking, as the other sectors in this regard. And we learned a lot from your experiences. I'd like to ask you, each one of you, to give our industry advice as we embark on this journey of the Open API. And if somebody gave the advice already, just move on to the next point of advice in the circle. And I'll start with the same order by which you spoke. So Kunal, give us one advice and wish us luck.
Well, I think you should not look at identity as a separate industry. Identity will basically inform every industry's interoperability and use cases and the commercialization opportunities that you present, right? In banking in particular, in open banking in particular, identity is the key barrier today to adoption. As quickly as identity industry can move towards a ubiquitous solution, it will remove a significant barrier to customer adoption, improve customer experience, and really enhance customer journey. So I think, to be honest, good luck to you absolutely as an industry, because your industry will drive success for all the other sectors in this space.
The foundation. We provide the foundation. Identity is the foundation. Kunal, thank you so much for being with us. We wish we had a lot more time to discuss with you, but we need to get on to the identity discussion.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Ian?
Yeah, very good point, Kunal. So just really agree with that. But the thing I would say is collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. I would say this if you're thinking about this nationally, if you're thinking about it as a particular industry, a particular company, don't try to go it alone. Look at those partnerships, look at who you need to work with, and develop these APIs together. And I think that's a secret to success. So best of luck. And I totally agree that identity is not a separate thing. It's something we all need.
Fantastic, fantastic. Great to hear that. Hervé?
Well, my advice will be build and publish as soon as possible, and don't hesitate to publish, since it's an example to other people. It's a way of inspiration, and this is quite useful. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much for being with us. Sorry about the quickness by which we're switching. For all of those of you who've been asking questions, most of them have been asked about identity, so we'll come back to the final panel. But first, we have all the presentation that you've all been waiting for, and that is from SIA on identity, on OSIA. And I'd like to ask Debora Comparin to step up and take the stage. Welcome, Debora.
Thank you very much. Let me share my presentation. Hi, everyone. So thank you very much. I appreciate particularly the advice that we just received on the ecosystem approach and the community approach, which before even starting the presentation, I want to share that this is exactly the approach that we have taken at OSIA. So we truly believe that the key to success was collaborating not just within what we call the identity industry, but also with governments. And what we are trying to do is to extend this to other sectors, because we do understand that identity is a service, like we mentioned just now, is a service and an enabler to many other sectors like telcos and banks, but not only. So I would like to just take 15 minutes to go through quickly where we stand within the OSIA initiative, what we've done so far. A quick introduction for those of you who don't know us. So OSIA is an initiative that was born in 2018, is a digital public good. And what we aim is to bring interoperability in the identity space. And we bring interoperability with the development of open APIs. So exactly like it was done in the telco space and in the banking that we've seen just earlier. Why this? So in 2018, like I mentioned, this whole initiative started. Open APIs certainly are not something new, but it is new in the identity market. And in 2018, we sat down. When I say we, I mean governments and with private sector, with the identity industry. We sat down around the table and we discussed which were the pain points on technical developments of identity systems. And three main pain points came up from that discussion that led to this need to bring interoperability. So the first one also was mentioned before by Boston Consulting, and that's really the need of bringing market innovation, of unleashing innovation, of building a competitive, a playing field competition, so that new ideas, new startup could spur and using the open APIs to develop new services around identity. So that's the first need that came up. The second one, again, it was mentioned before, it's about addressing vendor locking and integrator locking. So we know that identity solutions are complex infrastructure to set up. And so they are composed by different modules, different products. And it was very important for governments to be able to implement multi-vendor programs. So meaning issuing RFPs, tenders, where they could select different modules from different vendors and having that assurance that those modules could be connected with each other. Another side of vendor locking, integrator locking, is the ability of bringing some evolution to an existing system, to a legacy system. So for instance, if I want to just replace one component, or if I want to add a component to an existing ecosystem. So the idea is to be able to do this without investing too many resources into that, an integration effort. And the third point was identity as a service. So we've said it, is an enabler. So identity is important, not just in the context of foundational system. So for governments to manage the identity of their citizens and residents by issuing ID cards, passport, driving license, and so on and so forth. But it's much more than that. So there's a real need in other sectors, so for third parties to be able to verify the identity or some claims of potential customers or customers. And also there's a need for citizens to be in control of their identity and to be able to use it online. So one of these need that came up from the discussion is the ability of linking what is a foundational identity systems with all the services that go around it. And because of if you summarize all these three needs, interoperability is key to address the three main points. So this is where our journey started. Again, the point on community. We understand the importance of working together. We understand that to reach interoperability, we wanted to sit around a table with all the key stakeholders, be able to work together, and together as a community define what would be the future standard, the future open APIs for interoperability. And what we wanted to avoid is to sit back, to stay idle and wait for a dominant player to come up in the market and as a result imposing their APIs or its APIs, its solution in the market. So this is why we really started from the beginning with a partnership and a community approach. So to be a bit more specific, you can see here in the slide our community. So on the right side of the slide, you see the governments who have joined this initiative. On the left part of the slide, you can see the private sector. And I can proudly say that the community has been growing in the past 2 years. In a nutshell, OSIA is about facilitating the choice, the connectivity among different modules for governments. So if I really had to simplify what it does, it allows governments to select from the market the modules, the components that they need for their solution, and being assured that they can easily connect those systems, those modules, without investing integration effort. So this is something that we saw also in the slides of TM Forum, where there was this picture showing this easy connectivity among components. So that's exactly the same analogy that we are using here. I unveiled that the approach to interoperability of OSIA is based on open APIs. But before we understood that open APIs could bring the solution that we were looking for, we set for ourselves some guiding principles. So before jumping into the solution, we said as a community, what is important to us? So whatever we come up with, whatever is the solution, we need to define 2 or 3 principles that we're going to follow. And so the first one was sovereignty of choice. So what was important for us was not to define the architecture or a particular workflow, because we didn't want to define a product. We thought that every country has to be free to choose the components that they would need, that would fit with their legal framework and their needs, and be able also to define the workflow. So how these various components are able to connect and communicate with each other. So what we offer is that common language, that common understanding among components, but we do not define this is the solution you have to implement, this is the product. The second principle is about technology neutrality. So this in short means that those modules, those bricks that I have been discussing so far are black boxes. So we think that this is very much the value proposition of every vendor, right? This is what they can bring in the market, and this is how they compete. And competition means innovation. And so for us, it was important to keep that in the market and not to touch the technology or to define the technology that lies inside those components. This is why we stayed at the interface level. And the third pillar is privacy by design. So it was again evocated during the webinar earlier. Today it's particularly important. We mentioned it's Data Privacy Day. So even if OSIA operates at the interface level, it's very important to us that we consider and we translate those best practices around privacy by design in our approach. So again, when we came up with the Open APIs solution as a good fit for us, a good solution to solve interoperability, we checked that this solution complied with these three principles. So this is a little bit the introduction, if you want. So what I would like to do now is to be a little bit more concrete as to how OSIA works really. If I had to explain in a simple manner, I would say that OSIA, we could break OSIA into two parts. So there is the first part that is about internal interoperability, as I heard Madagascar earlier, he called internal and external interoperability. So that's pretty much that. So there's internal interoperability. So that interoperability that is needed in the foundational systems. So that interoperability that is needed to connect modules and systems that the government purchase to manage identity of their citizens. So it could be enrollment solution, it could be an ABIS, it could be card management system, databases, so on and so forth. So the idea is that we have defined a menu of interfaces and identified the bricks to bring this openness in this part of the solution. The second half, which is the newest part, if you will, in OSIA, is the external interoperability. So that's identity as a service, that's identity usage, whatever you want to call it. So identity is an enabler. So there are a lot of sectors, third parties, that are in need of using identity. So meaning of verifying attributes or even governments would need to bring in third parties that manage digital documents. So basically digital identities in the mobile phone, mobile wallet, there are many names for that. But essentially from this foundational system, how can we move to bringing service in identity? And so this is all this new set of interfaces that we are building that would be of great service to telcos, banks, but not only, and also to governments to set up and pass data in mobile identities and digital wallet, etc. So for citizens and users to be able to use then these attributes to go online safely. So if I were then now to be even one layer more specific, I would say we can take each one of these boxes, so internal and external interoperability, and open it. So if we open this box, you will see in the specifications that we have identified modules and we have identified a set of APIs, like a menu, that you could pick and choose depending on your needs to be able to connect those modules. So if we look on the box on the left, that is the foundational interoperability, the internal, if you want, interoperability, you'll find specification, some modules that are the ones you see in the slide, and you will find, I can show you, a whole, like a huge list of open APIs, of interfaces available today, organized by category, that you could select and implement in your modules to be OSIA compatible and therefore interoperable. The aim here is not to get into the details. You'll have all the links, so you can go and see on the specification. If we open the box on the right, which is the external interoperability, then allow me just one extra slide there before going to the bricks, because this is a very important topic, the identity usage, external interoperability. It's new in identity, it was new for us. And so we really took some time to go through the use cases, more than we have done it also in the internal interoperability, but especially here, to understand and define what is important, what are the use cases, what is this needed for. And then out of these use cases, we have identified then the interfaces, the open APIs that are mostly used. In simple word, the first use case is when you have external parties, third parties, that need to tap into central databases to verify identities. So this is KYC, know your customer needs. The second use case, it's more linked to this digital wallet. So it's how can you take data that exists in foundational systems and be able to issue digital credentials into wallets or mobile identities. And the third use case, it's very well known. It's the federation use case. So that's pretty much every time you press login with Google or Facebook, that's what you're using. We are not developing anything on the federation use case because there are very well-known protocols like OpenID Connect. And so we are, for the sake of completeness, we've put it, but we are pointing to that standard. So again, if you open this right box, voila, you'll find modules and components here, and a whole set menu of APIs as well. Everything I'm saying, so all the specifications, all the modules that I'm showing, it's publicly available. So OSIA is an open standard, and everything that we develop is openly available in GitHub. So in here you see the 2 links to our GitHub page. You can go and have a look. We are currently at V5 of our specs. You can also find instruction as to how you could reference OSIA. So in tenders, so every interface, and also with the version of that particular interface, because we are obviously evolving over time the specs. And I wanted to conclude the presentation talking about what is important for us in 2021. So what we are expecting to develop in the year to come. We want to continue working on specifications. It's important that we keep on evolving on new use cases, new technology. So we have already, like I mentioned, a V5 published, but there will be a V5.1 in February, a V6 planned for July. On top of these specifications, we are working on a demo. Actually, we have already tested those interfaces among players. I'm going to tell you a little bit more around this demo in a minute. And the other big topic is certification. We are going to publicly announce the certification program by the end of the year. So demo, just 2 words very quickly on how the demo works, because OSIA is not just specifications, but we wanted to test to see if it was to test it in a live environment, which helps us also as vendors correctly implementing the APIs. So we have selected 2 use cases, and we have imagined a potential workflow, a possible workflow for that use case. So for instance, in this case is the issuance of an ID card. So physical ID card, and also the digital companion. And so the idea is to show from enrollment down to the issuance the flow of data. And there are 6 or 7 vendors involved. Each vendor, different one, has provided 1 brick, 1 module. And we've shown that all of us, 6 or 7 all together, we can exchange data and go from the enrollment down to the issuance of the ID card, and we are interoperable. The other use case, it's around unique identity establishment and verification. So it's about enrolling the population and giving a unique identifier. and also allowing third parties to verify the identities and queries. So these are just 2 use cases, but one important one, and that I should mention, is that OSIA could be used for cross-border interoperability as well. So it's not just internal, external, but it's also the same way you can be interoperable among systems within a country. You could do the same, providing you have a proper legal framework among countries.
Debora, can you wrap up, please?
I have finished. So
okay.
This is, I wanted just to conclude saying that community is key for us, community and collaboration. So we are extending this to other verticals. Please, if you want to participate, be it government or BU government or private sector, contact us. I will be happy to work with you on and having the initiative to grow.
Excellent. Debora, thank you. Thank you for this overview. Fantastic results in such a short period of time. Bravo. I would like to go into the community voices and also the panel discussion now, focused on basically the topic of open APIs for identity. Debora, you stay with us, but I'll bring in Aziz, DJ Aziz, Mory, and Bali. And also bring in operator, the first person that raised their hand to be with the community voices. And while we're configuring that, I would like to ask the 3 gentlemen who have just joined. The 3 of you are actually on the board, advisory board of OSIA. In fact, DJ Aziz, you are the chairman of the advisory board. So my question for the 3 of you is, why did you join this initiative officially? I mean, I commend you for taking the initiative, but it would be helpful for people to understand, why did you join the initiative officially at this stage?
Well,
Aziz,
thank you very much. I think it has to do with past experiences. So, as you know, we had several stop and start on the ID program in Nigeria, and the experience has been that there's a lot of vendor login. So, and since we started a proprietary system, so when we started this particular ID system, we decided that it's going to be plug and play. So when OSIA invited us, we said, yes, you have converted, you are preaching to the converted. So that is why we joined, and we've been participating since then.
Excellent. So Mory, what's your perspective on why your country joined?
For us, it was important to be part of the conversation first, to understand what the challenges were on the other side, and to explain that when it comes to interoperability, some objectives are not mutually exclusive. So I piggyback on what Dr. Aziz said. We had a number of initiatives and issues start, and we tried to implement that were unsuccessful. So it was important to explain that also from a business point of view, interoperability worked for everybody. So when we were invited by OSIA, it was a pleasure to join and to maybe give a little more context to what our issues were.
Okay, thank you, Mory. Bali.
Well, thanks, Dr. Atick. I think, as I said, Madagascar is just starting to get into his new system. We checked the market for about 2 years now, and our main problem was how to avoid technology locking and vendor locking. And when we met with the OSIA people back in Johannesburg last year, we said, this is the initiative that is worth to be supported. Because we think that the OSIA normative and standardized approach is the one that we need, because we want to get everything interoperable and compatible from the market. And I think OSIA needs and really is worth to be supported. Thank you.
Okay, Debora, how large is the advisory board and how many members of the advisory board come from African identity stakeholders?
So the advisory board don't remember the exact number, but it should be 15 countries as of today. There are some countries in Asia Pacific, but most of the support is coming from Africa. And I have to say, it is very important to me, to us, because this initiative was born in Africa in 2018. There was a very clear need, yeah, exactly, and so this is where we started. Yeah,
right. So yes, ID for Africa in 2018 pushed the question of interoperability. Yeah. You took the initiative to bring in the governments around it. Yes, so OSIA is born in Africa. I'm pleased to see that the pain points in Africa are leading to a disruption in the way solutions are being developed. In fact, you're not just deploying OSIA compliant solutions in Africa, you'll be deploying it all over the world.
Yeah, yes, exactly. It clearly started with an expression of needs from Africa, but this is a global approach that is of interest in general to other parts of the world, and especially now with digitalization, when we discuss identity as a service, it's to me, it's very much universal as a need.
Exactly. Okay, great. So let me welcome Nuhu Ibrahim. Nuhu, could you present who you are and what country you're coming from, what you represent? And this is Community Voices, so please contribute your thoughts or your questions.
Good day. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Nuhu.
Thank you very much. My name, I'm Nuhu Ibrahim, Deputy Controller General of Immigration, retired from the service about 2 years ago.
So, what country?
Nigeria. I'm calling from Nigeria, Abuja, Nigeria.
Welcome.
Thank you, Doctor, and the Director General in NIMC, NIMC, everybody on the panel. Thank you very much. I just want to make a little contribution and comment on the issues raised, particularly the issue of the API with regards to Nigerian situation. I think the National Identity Management Commission has an enormous task, being recognized at the, I can say, the clearinghouse of identity in Nigeria, with many agencies like the Nigerian Immigration Service, Corporate Affairs Commission, the banks, now the Licensing Authority, and the government directive that the data with the Nigerian Identity Management Commission should be the standard data in Nigeria for identity purposes in Nigeria. So I think they have an enormous task in their own hand and challenge. Of course, as somebody who served with the Nigerian Immigration Service for 35 years, and also I was opportune to head the Passport Directorate, I think the Nigerian Identity Management Commission need to work with other agencies that have the capacity, better, I'm not saying that they don't have the capacity, but better capacity to handle situations. I believe the Nigerian Immigration Service with other agencies should work with them because of their experience in handling the issuance of passport in Nigeria. So this is just my little contribution. Thank you for the discussions and have a nice day. Thanks.
Thank you so much. DJ Aziz, would you like to respond if you wish?
Oh, yeah. Well, no, I've been missing him, but maybe because of the COVID, I didn't even know that he retired. So, but we've been working together, and we also understand that the work is enormous, and we are supposed to have all the stakeholders, and also I also mentioned about collaboration. So the whole purpose of harmonization of identity is to really work with all other agencies. Some have different experiences, like in awareness, and some in the like say the border control and immigration issues. So all these are specialized areas, and we need to work together. Thank you very much.
So, DJ Aziz, and this is a question for the other panelists as well. Do you have a national identity steering committee that's standing, that actually in that promotes the collaboration between the different agencies, or is this done on an ad hoc basis, on an as needed basis? So, DG Aziz?
Yeah, well, all along since when NIMC has been set up in 2008, we had a harmonization committee of most of the data capturing agencies. And now with the advent of the ecosystem program, we have the project steering committee at the highest level of ministers that will take all these decisions. And then we have a technical committee, which actually is the harmonization committee that translated into the technical committee. And then also we have a legal regulatory working group that is also part of making sure that all these are in place. Yeah.
Mory, where do we stand in Guinea with the collaboration?
Yes, we do have a steering committee that has been in place for a number of years. It started when the ID for the program came, and similar to Dr. Aziz, depending on the projects, we have also technical sub committees that are in place. And when we get to execution, it gets elevated to the highest level, occasionally at the ministry level as well. So we do indeed have those steering committees.
Have it in place. Okay, and Bali?
Yes, Dr. Atick. Madagascar also set up already a national coordination committee that is led by two ministers, the Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Justice. That was about 4 years ago already, if not more. But then with this new reform that is in place, we also set up a very high-level steering committee composed by all the permanent secretaries of all ministries.
Okay, excellent. So all of you essentially have put in place the steering committees to improve collaboration between the different stakeholders. I'd like to take community voice. I understand we do have someone raise their hand, Mika, but there is no video. So if you are hearing me, could you please introduce yourself and present your perspective?
Okay, good afternoon, Dr. Atick.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to giving me this platform. My name is Milka. I'm from Namibia. I'm working for the Ministry of Home Affairs and Immigration, Safety and Security. I have been with civil registration for years, but now I'm with the Refugee Program Management, Identification Program Management, and Documentation. So it's a pleasure. I remember we met Dr. Atick in Joburg 2019. It was a pleasure meeting you. I have been, let me thank the presenters for the comprehensive, detailed presentation. I know that technology is like scientists. It's moving fast. You need to, every day you need to develop something new. But nevertheless, while we are focusing on moving fast, if you come to IPC, when you compare comparison with the economy, security, and all these things, my concern was, I don't know whether, I know I will be outlined. My concern is, yes, we are focusing more on security or universal. I would rather direct this to Dr. Atick. We are promoting across border universal identification system, and as such as we are promoting for universal identification system in different countries in a different continent, we are also having a lot of vendors coming in and equipments and all these things. I see this display when I was in South Africa. So my question is in terms of security, what justice are we doing? Because everybody want to be the best when it comes to technology. When it comes to presentation, everybody, he or she is the best. So I just wanted to how do we go about this, especially in terms of security, because there is more, every day there is a new technology, and how will in future, it seems it's running fast, how will we also protect this when it comes to identification system? The other issue what I want to raise, I'm also here, we are also promoting identification for refugees. As we know, we're finding people are fleeing countries, and we are also finding stateless person in our countries. We are also having displaced people. while we are promoting for ID for everybody, somehow there is a gap between the stateless and displacement and a refugee running all over Africa, leaving their country because of one reason or another. That is human beings. We cannot. That is humanitarian. As such, we cannot stop it. So, what is the opinion on that one? As we are focusing on universal, this should be inclusive. That is my own opinion. The other issue is the security. When it comes to the security of data, I'm quite interested by Debora and in telecom. I cannot, Mr. Turkington or something. It was quite comprehensive. So those are my concerns. What can we align? What can we align in this area? Okay. Thank you.
So let's take. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So why don't we throw at the panel the first issue, which is if you can contribute to this subject. Obviously, as you're opening the standards in Open API, things are moving around. Somebody who is not authorized perhaps is able to get in because now it's not a monolithic system sitting behind a firewall. It has connectivity to the external world, etc. So what are you doing? And then Debora, you can comment after if you have something to add from an API recommendation. What are you doing to make sure that the data security and the security and integrity of the ID system is not compromised in the process of making it interoperable? You made it also insecure. Any comments in that regard?
Well, if I may, we have an agency that specialize in cybersecurity and security systems. So any initiatives that will have to be implemented would have to be reviewed and approved by that entity, that either it be open source, Open API, or any solution. The security will always be the determining factor for choice or adoption. So we have a review process in Guinea. I assume it's the same in many countries. And to go back to OSIA, we were impressed by the focus and the attention that was placed on security. When we attended the meeting, that was the first, one of the main components of their approach. So that's what we do in Guinea. I hope that helps.
Okay, so anybody else, DJ Aziz or Bali, do you want to comment on the security of your ID systems?
Just a quick comment, Dr. Atick. That is a very, very big issue indeed. But we're planning to build collaboration. We start from the point that we do not want to reinvent the wheels. So we're starting to get the collaboration from the European Union very soon, and probably also we're building another collaboration with Estonia. We all know that Estonia was one of the most prominent country dealing with cybersecurity. So we intend to approach them. We went there once, twice already. So we think we can set up something within those collaborations. And of course, and not to forget it, we push OSIA to go deeper in that question.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Chairman, I think security is always a moving target. And at any time T that we need to then apply the best practices, like classifying even the national ID as a critical national infrastructure. Therefore, it has to be protected under the mandates of the nation. Also conducting what we all know, background checks on all the employees and also vendors is also very important. And implementing all the ISO standards on the data center, disaster recovery, and also the offices, and also implementing like surveillance systems, then the firewalls, penetrating systems, And also that I understand recently that most government and health hospitals and finance were questioning, let's say, putting data in the cloud. But my own understanding of the key management systems in the cloud have improved so much that you can really manage your security.
You can trust data on the cloud, even if it's sensitive data.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Debora, do you wanna comment before I go to Jacob for Community Voices? Do you wanna comment on what is OSIA doing to ensure that you're maintaining security?
Yeah, so as Bali and Mory and Aziz commented, it is clearly something very important for governments. So we have experts in all the 20 companies that join in OSIA working group. So we have put a subgroup of experts working on security aspects. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I was muted.
We lost you for a second.
Okay, so we do tap into the expertise of all these 20 companies. On top of that, what we realized, because of the importance of the topic, we're starting working with the universities, because we want to go beyond just the industry and really tap into the knowledge and that exists in the academia and the research centers. That's soon to be unveiled.
Now, is there any attempts to assess if there's any architectural loophole and vulnerability that's produced when you create modules connected by API? Are there attempts to study what vulnerabilities there are?
That's exactly what we want to do with universities. We want to involve research centers so they could have an external eye that is not just the one of vendors to the whole system, you know, as an holistic approach, and saying and bringing us, finding out if there are potential threats or problems, but also bring best practices to the overall system.
Okay. So basically, I'd like to welcome Jacob to the panel, and also encourage any others who want to join the Community Voices to raise their hands. This is the time. This is the segment on Community Voices. You've got the panel. Jacob, please introduce yourself and tell us where you're coming from. And welcome, of course. Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, I'm Jacob Odada. I work for the Pan-African Parliament, which is an African Union institution, and I'm coming in from Johannesburg, where the headquarters is. Mine is in terms of actually this is geared towards Debora more. I'm looking at the African Union is now rolling out the CFTA. So my question would be, have you explored the opportunities that having an open ID, an open ID system across Africa, the benefits that CFTA would get from such a system? I'm looking at areas in terms of things like cross-border money transfer, because if you're able to successfully authenticate users across jurisdiction, it means you can also be able to implement money transfer, which is actually required if you're going to successfully have intra-Africa trade. So I'm asking, have you explored working with the African Union in terms of having such a system in place? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So for us, what you mentioned is a use case, right? Like we work on a use case basis. So we are constantly looking for experts, for people who can really explain us the pain points for each use case, so that we help developing the right framework, the right set of APIs to tackle that. This being said, we do have APIs for data access and for data sharing that could be used for this cross-border interoperability. But what I'm keen in exploring is to go further in this use case. So we know that cross-border is a big word, so then we need to really get down into the details of what that really means. So for instance, you mentioned payment, which is different than other sub-use cases of the cross-border interoperability. So I'd be happy actually if we can connect and discuss this further, because for sure we have some APIs that can be used, but what we want to do is to package them in the framework of this particular use case. So if you go in our specification at the very beginning of the document, there are all the use cases and all the interfaces you could use. And this is one that we would like to add. So I'm happy actually if you want to discuss with me later on, I'll be happy to talk.
Let's connect you, Jacob, with SIA and Debora. That would be great. That would be a great outcome. Okay, Jacob, thank you so much for your contribution. You're welcome. Let's get Mohammed. Mohammed, please introduce yourself. And then I see also Adil raised the hand. Please elevate the community voice, people.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I am from Djibouti. My name is Mohammed Nasser. I work at ANGEIE. It's an institution under the presidency. I have a question for Mr. Bali. You guys implemented the X-Ray in your country, and this is what you are currently doing it. So I wanted to know, how did you convince the other institution to join your ecosystem? How did you convince them to create and use those APIs that will allow other parties to access their data? And another small technical question also for Debora. I wanted to know, like, there are many protocols used in the open APIs. Usually the top two that comes are SOAP and REST. Which one do you consider the best? And should we set one that all the institutions should use, or give them the free option? That's it. That's my question. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, Bali, could you?
I think I just said what we were doing. We convened that at the highest level, we set up a strategic steering committee, and all permanent secretaries of all ministries are members of that level. So whatever decision is taken, it's first taken and exposed within that strategy steering committee. And once everybody understands what is it about, then only we get it down to the technical coordination committee. And that's the only way. And I think the way how we do it is that we present the benefit that everyone can get from a decision. But then also, we present also the risks that the whole country and every one of us is taking by taking that decision. So that's how we do work, and we advance progressively. We advance on that question.
Debora?
It's a REST protocol in our case, and so on this one I rely on the expertise of the OSIA working group, and they decided to go for this protocol.
Okay.
As being
Perfect.
The state of the art in terms of protocol for open APIs.
Thank you. Let's keep going with the momentum. Adil, please introduce yourself.
Hello, hi there. Hi everyone. My name is Adil Deori, and I work for the GSMA. So we're working on an initiative to standardize the APIs for the mobile money providers. And my question is specific to Debora and the APIs that you are working on. So is there a way that, sorry, I was going to say, have you already worked with the GSMA in terms of the work that we're doing with APIs and the harmonization of the APIs? And if not, is there a way for us to collaborate on that work we're doing at the GSMA?
Thank you for your question. Absolutely. Yes, with pleasure. So if you could connect, or I don't know if ID4Africa could connect me to you, yes, I'll talk to you with pleasure, and definitely we can take it offline, because there's an interest on our end to work with GSMA. Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is the objective of this
Exactly.
live cast, is bringing together and interoperability of discussion. That's an important area.
Yes.
Okay. Adil, thank you very much. Pierre, can I ask you to introduce yourself and let us know your perspective? If you want to speak in French, it's also possible. You can speak in French, but speak slowly so I can translate what you're saying.
Okay, merci. Moi, c'est Pierre Clavé Cairo du Burundi. Je travaille à l'Institut de statistique comme chef de... Yes.
Burundi, okay.
Yes. Comme chef de service d'études et statistiques et démographiques.
The chief of the studies of the studies and demographic studies.
Yeah, yes. Bon, ma question vient du fait que si on essaie de voir comment ça fonctionne le système d'état civil au niveau général, au niveau de l'Afrique, et voir les initiatives qu'il y a depuis, je dirais, 2014 pour amorcer les systèmes de fonctionnement de l'état civil. La base, c'est d'avoir...
Registration. And since 2014, you've been working to amorcer, to start this activity.
OK. La base, c'est d'avoir une carte d'identité crédible qui peut montrer la personne, qui est la personne. Et puis, la question du fait de la question de Jacob, qui travaille au niveau du Parlement, la question de Jacob, qui parle d'avoir une base interopérable au niveau de l'Afrique, au moment où nous avons des problèmes d'avoir des bases interopérables à l'intérieur des pays.
Okay, so the challenge is that to get interoperable across countries at the time when we don't even have interoperable within the countries. So that's the context to this challenge.
Mm-hmm. Bon, qu'est-ce que le Parlement africain peut faire pour faire le plaidoyer au niveau des pays pour qu'il y ait d'abord quelque chose des bases interopérables à l'intérieur des pays avant de passer à des bases interopérables au niveau du continent? C'est ça ma question. Je me dis qu'il faut quelque chose de plaidoyer au niveau des pays avant de passer à une dimension internationale. Je vous remercie.
Okay, merci beaucoup. So what can the African Union or African Parliament do to promote within a country the development of interoperable ID systems and that would be ready to become interoperable across the continent? So what are they doing in that regard? I'm not sure if we do have the gentleman, is he still available to come back and answer that question? If not, we will connect Pierre with the appropriate authorities so they can answer that question. Operator, could you please bring back Pierre, je ne vois pas la personne qui représente le Parlement africain, mais on va vous connecter tous les deux.
OK, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
But your question is very, very pertinent and it's very important. And it brings me back to what are the priorities? I mean, we hear a lot about regional identity. You know, you've got ECOWAS, you've got the East African initiatives, etc. And we've always said, before you become regionalized, you have to get your house in order. You have to get your databases to be inclusive, to cover the entire population, and you have to be interoperable with your own services before you start interoperating with other countries. I mean, the EIDIS framework for interoperability and trust frameworks in Europe has taken a long, long time. And I'm not convinced that this is the right priority for Africa to start with, because we got to focus on the national systems and make sure they're in there. So your point, thank you for making that point. Musa?
Thank you, Dr. Atick. I would like to express myself in French for DRC audience. Merci beaucoup.
Speak and then stop. Speak and stop so I can translate. Otherwise, we won't be able to translate.
Merci beaucoup. Moi, c'est Moussa Moussavouli Mbouto. Je suis coordonnateur de la commission scientifique du plan national du numérique de la République démocratique du Congo, attaché à la présidence de la République.
I'm the coordinator of the scientific committee for the digital transformation in the RDC in Congo. And you actually work in the Prime Minister's office or the President's office? I didn't get that.
Présidence de la République.
Presidency, and I work in the office of the President of the Republic.
Ok, je voulais poser une question à ID for Africa, même si je suis ambassadeur de ID for Africa en RDC, mais également à Debora de OSIA. Ma question se justifie par le fait que l'année prochaine, le président de la République démocratique du Congo va assumer la fonction de la présidence de l'Union africaine.
En 2022?
Can you translate?
Yeah, yes. So basically, I asked you, your president will assume the presidency of the African Union in 2022?
Yes, okay. Maintenant, le Congolais, la RDC, c'est un pays qui est francophone et c'est le pays le plus grand en Afrique de la population qui s'exprime en français. Beaucoup de Congolais
speak in French in Africa.
Beaucoup de Congolais suivent les webinars et les livecasts de ID for Africa. Et ils aimeraient suivre davantage ces livecasts, mais il y en a qui font face aux freins, à la barrière de la langue. Je voulais proposer, s'il est possible, que pour les prochains livecasts, qu'il y ait un mécanisme de traduction en français pour permettre aux milliers de Congolais qui sont de plus en plus intéressés à suivre les débats assez intéressants qui sont organisés par ID for Africa.
Okay, so what Musa is asking for is basically better mechanisms to allow the Francophones to participate in the debates that the livecasts are bringing to the table. As you know, we do have a French channel, so anything that's said in English gets translated to French. The French to English translation is a somewhat of a challenge, and we're working on that to make sure that we give inclusive access to both Anglophones and Francophones. We're hoping that the Zoom platform will improve. I mean, for this session, as we're speaking, there are actually 3 translators that are working behind the scenes to animate the French audio channel. So anybody from a Francophone country in Africa should be able to hear French and not me. They will be hearing the translator as simultaneous translation. And of course, we will welcome panelists who are speaking in French, just like you do. I speak French. I know Deborah speaks French as well. And so, but yes, we want something more systematic. We're working on it. Language is a challenge. Okay, well pointed. But you had a question for Deborah, and then I want to close the session with a question. Okay, Moussa, do you want to close your question?
Oui, par rapport à Debora, je voulais savoir si OSIA pourrait organiser, en collaboration avec ID for Africa, une session spéciale pour la RDC pour permettre aux Congolais de comprendre davantage tout ce qui a été développé par OSIA. Mais une session en français. Merci.
Okay, Deborah, you can translate what he said in English, and then you answer in English and French. No, answer in English and French, yes.
Okay, so he's asking to ID for Africa and OSIA if we could have a shared session where in French, where we could present OSIA so that the key messages are well understood by the large population of RDC. Donc, je pense que c'est une question en fait pour tous les deux, Joseph, pour vous aussi. Donc, moi, je serais ravie de présenter OSIA en français, il n'y a aucun souci. En fait, nous aussi, on essaye d'utiliser les deux langues, donc en anglais et en français. Et donc, voilà, c'est la réponse pour moi. Et oui, on serait ravis d'avoir une session dédiée en français. Après, c'est aussi ID for Africa. So in English, I'll be very happy to accommodate the request. Indeed, we try to use both languages, English and French, because we are well aware of the importance of it. And I would be very happy to have this session. But of course, it's also to ID for Africa to answer.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, it's something that we would welcome as well. Obviously, we, as ID for Africa, have to be open to other initiatives as well, because we cannot just appear to be aligned, even though we do endorse the Open API platform in general. We do not represent an alignment with OSIA as such. But, you know, we've opened our platform to you in the past, where in the physical meetings, you were able to bring the community together and ran your English and French sessions very, very well. Actually, I want to, since we're running out of time, there is an elephant in the room, and I think I'm going to have to recognize that. And that's going to be for Debora. And my question, I will go back to what I had said towards the end of my opening remarks, and that is, how do you see the OSIA initiative collaborating with the MOSIP initiative? To me, those two initiatives belong together. They need to be interacting together. They need to be working together. So perhaps you're already doing that. If you're already doing that, tell us what you're doing. If not, launch a call for collaboration. Tell us what you want.
Thank you, Joseph, for this opportunity. I agree with you. We should collaborate. So I have reiterated this request in the past. And again, I'm calling to MOSIP, but not only to OpenCRVS as well, to all those new initiatives around open source to join the community. Because as I mentioned earlier, OSIA, it's transparent to technology. So the idea is that we are trying to solve interoperability in the market by bringing this interoperability framework. And then we are connecting modules, whatever those modules are. Honestly, be it open source, be it technology from a vendor, it's transparent to us. The important thing is that we solve this interoperability challenge. So we do welcome any participation from any other initiative, as well as vendors, as well as governments. Okay, so basically, today, there isn't any concrete element. No, there is not. There isn't, but we're hoping that this will happen. I'm hoping that this session would have stimulated, now that we've completed part 1 and part 2 open source, open API, and that we position them correctly so that people don't think that they're opposing to each other. I'm hoping the outcome would be some collaboration that will benefit the industry. I want to thank everybody that has participated in the current panel included, plus the other panelists who we've said goodbye to earlier. I think it was a fantastic session. I hope the audience found it interesting. We could not answer all the questions, but I was glad that we had some community voices. Just want to remind you, we're not just talking about technology and vendor lock-in. We're talking about basically a framework for developing solutions, a framework for basically bringing innovations, make it faster, bringing the industry to collaborate together, and with the government being at the table instead of being a recipient just of the final product. I think we're heading into an era where the world is going into more open systems, so that an ecosystem can emerge, and then may the best features and products compete and win depending on the value proposition that they make, but should be no barriers to allowing those features, allowing those offerings to happen just because of an architecture. And that's what we're talking about here. Open API is basically eliminating that barrier which was in place in the past. If you were a monolithic solution provider, you dominated the market. But now, basically, anybody can enter with a value proposition, and I expect the innovation will accelerate. I hope that the African authorities
will be able to invest capacity building to allow the knowledge within their organizations and within their country to take advantage of the open API infrastructure, whether it is in service delivery or whether it is in the allowing other third party accessing their systems, or in their development methodology. ID for Africa, as always, will accompany you in this regard and will continue to bring to your attention frameworks that seem to be very promising. So with this, I thank you once again for having stuck with us for this long. And once again, the panel, your contribution is noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.